Good morning, Wabash. Giving today's chapel talk is Professor Greg Dallinger. Professor Dallinger is a visiting instructor of chemistry here at Wabash. He was born in Lafayette, Indiana, but moved to Crawfordsville at the age of 2. Raised 2 blocks from campus, he graduated from Crawfordsville High School in 2001. Professor Dallinger is the first second-generation faculty member at Wabash College in over 100 years and is most likely the first Crawfordsville High School graduate to become a faculty member. He attended the College of Wooster as a chemistry major, where he played tennis and graduated magna cum laude in 2005. He then attended graduate school at University of California, Berkeley, studying the effects of Hofmeister salts on biomolecules by X-ray absorption spectroscopy. Outside of Hayes Hall, he enjoys playing basketball, attending Wabash athletic events, and is a supporter of Liverpool Football Club. Giving his first chapel talk titled, "What a Long, Strange Trip It's Been," Professor Greg Dallinger.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Sphinx Club for giving me the opportunity to talk here, particularly Ian Baumgartner, Corey Egler, and Scott Morrison, and thanks everybody for showing up. When I was asked to give this chapel talk last week, I, of course, was honored to be given the opportunity, but I had really no idea what I was going to talk about. And with 6 days to prepare, the clock was kind of ticking. But as I began to reflect on my experiences with Wabash College throughout, my first basketball game as a 2-year-old to my first lectures here as a chemist, there's so many things which Wabash means to me. And despite not being an alum of the college, sort of being a hanger-on, boy, it's really been a long, strange journey to get here today. I can safely say that the last time I was up on stage in the chapel, I was certainly no more than half the man I am today, quite literally. I was about 4 feet tall and 80 pounds, singing soprano with the Glee Club for a Christmas concert. If you go look at the back issues of The Bachelor through the library, you can find an article about it. I also had a nice white blonde afro standing up here. Didn't quite have the bow tie thing going back then, but so I'm a little bit different now. When I was growing up right near campus, my goal was not to be the first CHS alum to teach at Wabash or the first second-generation professor here in Lord knows how long. I would have to defer to the expertise of my distinguished colleague, Professor Emeritus David Phillips, for the history lesson there. In fact, the chemistry wasn't even on my radar. There was not some big plot by the Dallinger family to slowly take over the chemistry department of Wabash College. When I was 15 years old, my plan was to become a professional dancer. Yeah. Likely ballet, in case you're wondering. Now, how the heck did I get from that to being a chemistry professor? Well, I got involved with dance. During one summer when I was in elementary school, there was a theater workshop at the Vanity Theater in town. And my brother was really interested in theater, and he wanted to go. And Mom figured it was probably a good way to get both of us out of the house for a couple hours every day in the summer. So I was signed up, and over to the Vanity we went. And part of this theater workshop, there was acting and all that jazz, but we also took, some dance lessons because there were a couple of productions that summer that kids were going to be in. And after a couple of these dance classes, had a good time, and later that summer I went home and I told Mom and Dad, I said, I think I want to start taking dance classes. And I really don't think anyone expected me to say that. So my parents, being who they are, went and signed me up, said, fine, that's what you want, let's do it. So I started taking hip-hop classes at a local dance studio and developed there into jazz and tap and eventually taking ballet classes. So if this doesn't go well, someone might have to play me off on the piano, give you a little soft shoe. Now, when I was taking ballet lessons, I ended up going to perform the Nutcracker in Indianapolis with the professional ballet company there. Did a few productions, took a lot of classes there, and it was a pretty big time commitment. hour and a half, hour 15-minute drive each way to downtown Indy to take ballet for a couple hours, then jump in the car, then come home, then do homework, eventually became untractable. So I had to make a choice. And as you might have guessed, I didn't end up the next Baryshnikov. However, I still maintain an involvement with dance throughout my life. Once I made that decision was also about the same time I took my first chemistry class in high school with Mrs. Phillips. And while I can credit my father with my genetic predisposition for chemistry, it was really my classes with Mrs. Phillips that inspired me to pursue a career in chemistry. She was just, I can't stress how an amazing teacher she was for a precocious and somewhat obnoxious 16-year-old student that I may very well have been. Her no-nonsense approach to chemistry really inspired me, and of course, there's the Wabash connection there because Dr. David Phillips is, of course, her husband, my dad's colleague here at Wabash, and Mrs. Phillips really started me down the road to chemistry. Before that, obviously, I wasn't solving net ionic equations when I was 7 years old. That was for 9. That was a joke. But, I'd been around chemistry. I'd been to Dad's laser lab when one of the kids in my preschool was playing with guns. And my mom had rules in preschool that you weren't allowed to play with guns. Guns were not toys. And this, young child said, "Well, it's not a gun, Mrs. Dallinger, it's a laser." And Mom said, "That's not a laser. My husband has lasers, and that's not what they do." And the kid said, "Your husband doesn't have a laser." She's like, "Oh, yeah, he does." Well, a field trip later, and we saw the pulsed YAG in my dad's lab in the basement of Goodrich. And seeing that burn through a piece of paper is pretty cool. But, it was really Mrs. Phillips at high school that got me going, and there were so many teachers that I had at Crawfordsville that really shaped who I am that I wouldn't have had if I wasn't here. And so, Wabash is to thank for that. However, I did keep dabbling in the dancing arts. I was on the high school dance team at Crawfordsville High School, the first male member of a high school dance team in the state of Indiana. Yeah. Trust me when I say, you can't get much more different from Wabash College than the Indiana high school dance team circuit, especially around the millennium. From the all-male school we have here to the N-1 female population of the dance team. That meant that every time I went to a competition or a dance camp, it was me, the fellow ladies on my team, and about 400 other high school girls. Yeah. Now, as it turns out, one summer we went to dance camp, and I forget where, but it was a boarding camp. We were there for 4 days. We stayed in the dorms. We took classes. We learned dances. We did all this stuff. Of course, my presence there presented somewhat of an issue because communal-style housing and intergender housing was sort of an issue for high school people. So I had this palatial RA suite in the corner dorm with a private bathroom and like 2 bedrooms and all this stuff, whereas all the girls on my team were cramming like 5 or 6 into the bathroom trying to do their hair before dance. I'm like, I got plenty of time here. But I still remember the first day at that dance camp, they were talking about the rules, and they had the A, B, C's of rules for the dance camp. A was no alcohol, C was no car, B was no boys. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. They, of course, quickly realized once everyone started laughing and then looking at me, hey, look, there's a guy there. Like, oh yeah, I guess except for him, he's allowed. Now, moving on. When I was growing up, though, I appreciated Wabash, and I loved Wabash. And I didn't really realize how special of a place it was and how different it was from most schools, other than I was aware that women also went to college. But I figured small colleges with women, small college with Wabash, should be pretty similar. But as I moved on in my life, I come to realize how special a place Wabash really is. And trust me, when I was growing up, Wabash babysitters were the best. Their lax attitude towards the rules of bedtime and how many hours one is allowed to play Nintendo in the evening, a little more fun than our standard crop of babysitters. Now, in addition to going to almost all the basketball and football games with my dad, I think my two favorite events at Wabash when I was a kid were homecoming floats, judging them with Dad, and the Fiji Island party. And this was back in the day, gentlemen, before lawyers got involved, not that I'm disparaging lawyers, but the Fijis used to build a big pool on their porch, huge stairs to get in, and a rope bridge going across, which of course had no supports. So they had a couple of freshmen walking people across the rope bridge. And then, the best part, when we got inside, off to one of the corridors, they had the lava room. Tinfoil lined ceiling, red lights, mattresses everywhere. So we got to go and jump around on the mattresses in the hallway, which as a kid, that was awesome. And it was great for my parents because they knew if I was allowed to jump on the beds, I wasn't going anywhere. And also judging homecoming floats. When I used to be awake earlier in the mornings on the weekend, Dad and I would often be on the crew going around judging the floats for homecoming. I remember we were playing Anderson one year for homecoming, who are the Ravens. And I presumed that we were going to see many Edgar Allan Poe themed floats. Alas, there was only one, and it earned the Lambda Chi some bonus points. The other greatest float I ever remember was the Fijis had an animated sinking ship one year that broke in half and went below water waves. And I could go on with stories about this, about Wabash, for a really long time. Whether it be playing t-ball with Tom Pusjak and Jim Ettling as a 6-year-old, going onto the roof at Goodrich before the 100th Monon Bell game and meeting the announcer and holding his grandfather's leather sweater from Wabash from the 1900s. But all of these stories, again, are to be expected. But once I moved on from here, when I went off to college, when I went off to graduate school, I didn't leave Wabash behind. Wabash was still with me wherever I went. In fact, the first time I ever went to the College of Worcester, my future alma mater, was my junior year in high school. It was Wabash's first year in the NCAC, and led by Josh Estel, Brian Latham, and our current coach, Antoine Carpenter, they made a run to the conference championship game on a Saturday. And I remember they won their Tuesday round game, and my brother was at college then, so it was me and my dad and my mom, and Dad and I were talking, wouldn't it be really cool if Wabash made the championship game? Like, we should go to that. And on Friday they won. And on Saturday we jumped in the car. Bless my mother for being so patient with the two of us and our almost fanatical devotion to Wabash basketball. And we went over to Worcester for the first time. At this stage, I knew that I wanted to study chemistry, and Worcester was sort of on my radar for potential schools. And as it turns out, that was the first of many, many, many trips to Worcester that I made over the years, and many, many more that my dad made. So for all of the athletes who, hate slogging over to Ohio for all those games, trust me, my dad's done plenty of those too. And I remember when we showed up for the game, we got there early, toured around campus, and I went to the visitors section at Worcester. I had my Wabash W on, and I was gung-ho for Wabash. Unfortunately for that evening, the Fighting Scots prevailed 114-91, despite a 36-point effort from Josh Estel, playing all 40 minutes, received a standing ovation when he walked off the court. As it turns out, that was the last time I was ever in the visitors section at the College of Worcester for basketball. So in my senior year, I started looking for colleges. Grinnell, Oberlin, and Worcester were my short list. And after a lot of attendance and a lot of thinking, I decided, of course, on the College of Worcester. Now, some people often ask, well, why didn't you think about going to Wabash? Wabash chemistry is great. And I agree. Wabash chemistry is amazing. However, having to take at least 2 or 3 classes from my dad would not really be fair to either one of us. So I needed a little bit of space. That was a little too close to home. So I decided to go over to Worcester. And even though I was only one of 10 students from Indiana in the College of Worcester's class of 2005, I still had Wabash ties there. 2 of my professors in chemistry, Paul Edmiston and Ted Williams, the last chemist to hit 400. No, that's the baseball player. Theodore R. Williams, a very famous and well-respected analytical chemist in his own right. Both were friends with my dad because they all served on the ACS Graduate Fellowship Committee. So, of course, Dallinger is a name that you don't see too often, so they knew who I was. However, there was a big surprise for me. During orientation, I was at my first year seminar class, which at Worcester is like freshman tutorial here. So we met with our group during orientation, and we were paired up to, interview one of our fellow classmates and then present, information about them to the class. The person I paired up with was a nice young female who I found out was Marissa Bambry. And for those of you who have been around, the name Bambry means something here, and that would be Dr. Tom Bambry, class of '68, who at the time was Dean of Students at Wabash. His niece was in my FYS class at Worcester. Can't get away from Wabash. How great is that? Now, I developed, as an aside, before I continue with my main argument, there's a special appreciation I developed for Worcester basketball when I was at college. Obviously, I was a fanatical Wabash basketball fan growing up. I went to every game. I was always there with Dad, hour before game to get the book ready, watching the team prepare. And it was that, Wabash is where I learned that devotion for a school and a team and a sport. And I got that appreciation for Worcester as a student there. By the time, I was in high school, the community at large was aware of my dancing prowess. I had survived the lumps and the hard knocks and the derogatory comments as you might expect a middle school dancer would get. But when I went to Worcester and I joined the dance team there, I wasn't sure how I was going to be received going out. I mean, there's, been some pretty nasty things that have been said to me over the years. And before our performance at Midnight Madness, I was very nervous. And as I'm walking out onto the court, Antoine Reynolds, the senior point guard and captain of the team, walks over to me and gives me a high five as I'm walking out. And that meant so much to me that I had that support there almost immediately. And so we got through our performance. It went, well. And afterwards, a couple of the juniors and seniors on the basketball team came up to me and they said, we appreciate what it is you're doing here. And if anyone gives you a hard time, you just tell us and we'll take care of it. And thankfully, my students at the College of Worcester were very understanding, and I didn't have any problems. But knowing that I had that support almost immediately is one of the reasons that Worcester basketball means so much to me. But of course, so does Wabash. And my freshman year, the first of many pairings of the two happened here in Crawfordsville. Remember, it was the Saturday before going back for second semester, and we stayed in town for the game. And my dad did an over and back on Sunday to get me and my brother back to college, which is, I can't even imagine doing that, so kudos to him. But of course, the question was, where am I going to sit? I mean, it's my alma mater, my current school, and my fellow classmates versus Wabash, 18 years of history. I consulted with my dad. It was really tearing me up, but I put on my Worcester shirt. I went and sat in the Worcester section. I put my head down, kept my mouth shut, and I learned to be Switzerland. So I'm sitting there, and it turns out it was an amazing game. Wabash ended up losing by 3 points to Worcester. And it was really just conflicting for me. The second game of the year was in February. The Little Giants made their first trip to Worcester, and when I was a student there. And Wabash won that game by 14. But before the game, I was there, stretching and warming up with the dance team, and I saw Coach Petty come out for warm-ups. And I went over and said, figured I'd say hi. I know Coach Petty knew me since I was a wee lad, and before the game, we went over and said, hey, Coach, congratulations. And we ended up talking for a few minutes about how things were going for me at school and, how I liked Worcester and how things were getting along. And, that's just such a special moment because that's a pretty darn big road game for NCAC basketball. And for Coach Petty to take the time to care about me who wasn't a player, wasn't a student, but to have that, connection was really special for me. And of course, for those of you who don't know, Coach Petty is from Worcester, Ohio, and a member of the Wayne County Sports Hall of Fame. Always, for every home game when I was there, received a nice standing ovation from the crowd, and certainly the best reception any visiting coach ever got from the College of Worcester. And I always thought it was kind of cool that, I was from Crawfordsville and I went to Worcester for college, and Coach Petty was from Worcester and ended up coming to Wabash to coach. That sort of relationship I always thought was really interesting. Now, as it turns out, there developed a big Wabash connection to Worcester during my time there. Starting my junior year, Evan Watson started at Worcester, and my senior year, little Teddy Polly. So we actually had 3 CHS alums at Worcester my senior year. And in fact, even this year I was back for homecoming, and Robin Murillo is a freshman at the College of Worcester. So, you know, we got a pretty good connection between Wabash and Worcester now. And actually a funny story about the Watsons, my junior year was the first football game Worcester played against Hope College on September 6th. It was a particularly balmy September. I believe it was about 95 degrees. And for some reason, I was asked to be the mascot for the game, for the Scots, which I, of course, agreed to because, hey, getting to caper around in the mascot outfit's a lot of fun. And the Worcester mascot at the time was a big Scotty dog uniform. So it was a thick black carpet and foam thing, and it was 95 degrees. I don't know how I didn't die of heat stroke, frankly. But I was there, and I was sort of, you know, doing my thing, capering around the track with the cheerleaders, saying hi to the children. And I saw Dr. and Mrs. Watson arrive at the game to see their son play his first college football game. So I, of course, go over to say hi, but kind of want to play a little joke on him. And I walk up into my best, you know, mascot voice, say, "Hello, Dr. Watson." He looks at me like, "Who the heck are you?" I pull the Scotty dog uniform open, and of course it's me. He recognized me, and, you know, we had a chat, and I said, "Welcome to Worcester," and, you know, went along their way. Now, moving on in my career, the summer after my junior year actually was another great moment of Wabash doing a lot for me. I was looking for a summer research program to get ready for applying for graduate schools in the fall, and I wanted to get off campus to really experience an R1 university research. Well, when I was home for spring break, I was over at the chemistry department, like one does when one's father is there, and I saw that Cornell University was having an RU program that was sent to Wabash, the flyer by Jeff Coates, class of '89, honorary doctorate last year. And Jeff, of course, I remember from when I was about 6 years old and he was a student here. And I said, "Hey, Dad, you know, think I could get into that Cornell RU program?" And he said, "Sure, why not?" So I applied and I got accepted, and I had a summer of working with Jeff at Cornell, which was really, really cool because Jeff is an amazingly good chemist and an amazing person. Now, it was an interesting time. I learned that synthetic organic chemistry, as you might have figured out for those of you who've had me in class, is not really my forte. I had gone from doing computational analysis of transition metal surfaces to making polypropylene oxide polymers, which is as exciting as it sounds, as it turns out. Although purifying something in a 1-liter SEP funnel is just so fun. You spin that thing around like a bolo. And of course, it was fun to get outside of my comfort zone and see, you know, different aspects to research and how graduate students, you know, interacted with science. And none of that would have been possible without Wabash College. And when it was time to choose a graduate school, there were lots of different places I was looking at. You know, the murderer's row of chemistry graduate schools, MIT, Harvard, Cornell, Stanford, Berkeley, University of Chicago, etc. I didn't get into Harvard, the only one. But, you know, having the letter from Jeff Coates, I am convinced was one of the big things in my favor for getting into all the graduate schools that I did. And when I was going out, my first graduate school visit was out at Stanford, California. And, as it turns out, one of my fellow prospective graduate students was John Dustman, class of '05, and Dustman actually ended up going to Stanford. And when I was there, I met with John, and we talked about Wabash and how the chemistry department was going and all those things, which was a lot of fun. And also, I ran into one of the graduate students at Stanford, who was Mike Vance, another Wabash College chemistry alum. And Mike was a great resource for me talking about the graduate school process and how you find a research group. You know, of course, obviously, I had a pretty heavy hitter in my corner back home, but to have a graduate student perspective on, you know, what to look for when you're trying to pick a graduate school really helped me, since that was my first one, know how to prepare for all of the visits that I had coming up. And also, you know, it was nice to see a familiar face out in California. Now, obviously, I did all my visits. I ended up choosing UC Berkeley. And I moved out there in 2005, 2,200 miles on I-80, through some of the most desolate parts of Nevada you could ever imagine. However, it's a big difference between being born and raised in Crawfordsville and moving out to California, in particular the Bay Area, in particular Berkeley. And it was a big adjustment for me to be out there sort of on my own in the real world. But luckily for me, I still had Wabash in my corner. There were two graduate students at Berkeley when I started, Amish Patel and Matt Strader, who my dad put me in contact with. And I met with both of them within the first week or two of being out in the Bay Area. And, they gave me such advice of, where is IKEA? Where's the Safeway? All those little things you need to know to get, furniture and sustenance and all of those things. And I even actually caught on with a couple of Monon Bell broadcasts out in California when I was out there, which is a pretty early kickoff on Saturday in the Pacific time zone. And so all of these connections to Wabash have really led me to where I am today. And even as it turns out, my girlfriend has a Wabash tie totally independent of me. When she was a junior, classics major at the College of Worcester, she went to a conference in classics, I presume, and she met, I'm not a classicist, I don't know, and at the conference she met a bunch of Wabash students, predominantly teaks, I'm told, and as it turns out, she came over for a couple of visits to Wabash to hang out with her friends, the teaks, and they treated her with such a esteem, as she should always be treated. And so because of that experience, she had a great impression of Wabash, in particular the teaks. So thank you to Tau Kappa Epsilon for making my job easier of convincing her to move to Crawfordsville with me. And as I wrap up here and think about, where I've come to, from a small, blonde, afroed soprano to a slightly less blonde, slightly less afroed, slightly less soprano professor, I've changed a lot over the years. I look a lot different than I did back then, more bow ties. And Wabash certainly looks a lot different too. The new library, new Detchen, the new athletic facilities, Hayes Hall. But even though I'm different on the surface, and even though Wabash has changed, at heart, I'm still the same kid that I was back then. And at heart, Wabash really is the same school. And when I came back here, it was so easy to fit right back in. Gentlemen, you of course were not students when I was a young, precocious lad, but the type of students and the type of men that Wabash makes now are the same ones that I remember growing up that have meant so much to me. And for everything that Wabash is and everything that Wabash has been to me, I wouldn't be here without Crawfordsville and without Wabash. So thank you to all of you for giving me that chance to come back and really fulfill an amazing thing, to be able to be here to teach with my dad for his 30th year here at the college it's just one of the most special experiences of my life. So thank you, gentlemen.
All right, just a few quick announcements. TGIF will be at Phi Psi at 4:30 on Friday. Tennis will be in Kalamazoo this weekend. Baseball starts their season out versus Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas this weekend. Track will be at the school down south, and basketball will be at Kenyon on Saturday. Please rise and sing Old Wabash.